Welcome to Markets Now. I'm Michelle Rook with Randy Martinson Ag. Seeing a lot of red on the board this morning with the exception of the hog market. And Randy, let's start off talking about the grains. Of course, we're end of month and first notice day and in the delivery period. And so with grains mostly lower, is it a function of all of those things?
I think so. I mean, we had heavy deliveries against the bean oil contract and against Chicago wheat. Those two markets got hit hard yesterday, and they're seeing some extra pressure here today. So I think that's part of it. And we're going to see some positioning again. I mean, a lot of producers are going to even up their portfolios. It's the end of the month and switch to get their portfolios more in line with their perspective. So I think it's part of that is coming into play. We're also seeing, where wheat traded up to some technical levels last week, and we're seeing, I think, some pressure come from there. Weather forecasts have changed a little bit. I think that's putting some pressure on as well. So it's a combination of everything that's kind of coming to a head here as we end the month.
Yeah, and when you look at wheat specifically, wheat had a 50 to 70 cent higher week last week in the wheat market. So it's in a month, some profit taking probably would be in order, don't you think?
Oh, most definitely. I mean, we had the best week we've had in 2 years in the wheat market. So I do expect to see a little bit of selling, especially in the winter wheat contracts. They traded up to some major resistance and we're, kind of falling off of that. Minneapolis didn't see as much of a push and it was a little bit stronger yesterday. But I think part of that could be because of, I think weather is driving both of them. The fact that we're picking up rains and slowing down planting progress up here in the northern regions. Plus, they're talking about rain for Russia and the Black Sea region. So I think those two are adding in a little bit of selling pressure too.
Yeah, no doubt. We should also talk about planting pace on wheat. Spring wheat was well ahead of average, and winter wheat conditions down just 1%.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised at how small the decrease was for the winter wheat conditions. Even though we did see, Kansas drop by 5%, Colorado drop by 5%, and we did see Oklahoma lower as well. But as far as planting conditions, producers saw the forecast. They saw that there was going to be rain. They went after it, and they got the planters out, and they got rolling last week with, just seeing a 7% more than anticipated by the trade for planting.
Yeah, no doubt. And when you look at states, all of the Dakotas, Montana, everybody, Minnesota, they all hit the fields running, didn't they?
They did. Minnesota was the best. I think it showed like 30% of its crop was planted last week for spring wheat. 28, I think it was for Montana, and then South Dakota came in with I think like 22% planted. North Dakota did lag a little bit. But we did get 15% planted last week, which is still a pretty good number.
Corn and soybean planting was also ahead of the average pace. Now we're going to slow down a little bit here with some of the rain. So how is the market going to handle that?
I think they're going to take it as being neutral just because we saw such an aggressive pace and we're a little bit ahead of what the average trade estimate was expecting. That I think is going to kind of wash out. Now, it depends on how long this lasts because this rainy system, we basically have rain in and out of the forecast for the next 2 weeks and a little bit cooler temperature. So it will be really interesting to see how much gets done in this next week and whether or not that's going to help the market or not.
No doubt. So soybean meal higher this morning, and it kind of led soybeans higher yesterday. So was that just meal oil spreading, or is the meal market concerned about this Argentina strike and the fact that they are behind pace on soybean harvest?
I think it's got a little bit of both to do with it. I mean, I think the bigger part was the fact that we saw the spreading between the oil and the meal. But I do think that this strike in Argentina is having a little bit of a play. It's only going to be a 3-day strike from what the press is kind of reporting. So I don't know how long of a lasting it will have or impact it'll have. But I think the fact that we're seeing with the meal oil spreads going on, and we're starting to get those spreads a little bit wide. So I think that's helping to bring them in line.
So the other things the market is kind of bracing for, watching for here today, first of all, we're likely to get guidance on the GREET model from Treasury sometime today, maybe later this afternoon. So that's going to be widely watched, isn't it?
It's going to be widely watched. And I know the trade is somewhat anticipating that it not be friendly news to the egg sector because of some of the restrictions that they're going to put on. We don't know. We'll see this afternoon if they do come out with it. I mean, we were expecting this earlier in the year. It didn't come into play. Let's hope it gets released so that we can put it behind us.
Yeah. And for those folks that aren't aware of the GREET model, this is how Treasury is going to base the tax subsidies for sustainable aviation fuel, right?
Correct. It's going to help to see, if ethanol can get the full benefits of the subsidies to go into the renew or into the sustainable aviation fuel, which would also then help some of our ethanol to go into the plants that we have in the U.S. already making the sustainable aviation fuel for the U.S.
Absolutely. Okay, we're also going to be seeing the FOMC meeting starting today, I think ends tomorrow. We're not expecting any change in interest rates, but we do have, Chairman Powell speaking. We're going to be kind of watching what he says in the press conference again, aren't we?
We are. I mean, right now, where it's not really going to be what they say as far as with the interest rate decision. It's going to be the tone of the meeting after we see, this after tomorrow afternoon. So it's really going to depend on whether or not they're going to hint of having any kind of reductions this year, or if we're going to continue to stay static and keep interest rates higher.
Yeah, we got a lot of economic data coming out this week, so it could be an interesting ride in the outside market, stock market, and whatnot, right?
Oh, most definitely. And, that's also spilling over to put a little bit of uncertainty and concern into the livestock sector, especially the meats. But there's other things other forces that are driving I think, the cattle markets right now.
Let's talk about that. Cattle down here today, except for the April, which has to converge with cash and goes off the board today. But USDA said yesterday afternoon they're going to test ground beef from all of the states where there's been bird flu. Are we trading that headline, or is this end of the month profit taking, Randy?
I think we're trading that headline. I think that's hitting the market because it's certainly going to bring some, uncertainty to the average consumer. I mean, it's going to kind of keep them to push away from buying ground beef until they see where this testing comes into play and whether or not there's any fragments or any residual of the bird flu in the ground beef. And it's hitting at a really bad time as far as meat consumption is concerned, because right now we're going into the beginning or about to go into the beginning of the barbecue season, where ground beef is one of the biggest consumed products.
Yeah. Do you think hogs are up just on the news this morning because maybe there's a switch from consumers from beef over to pork, or is this just some of these cattle hog spreads being placed again?
I think it probably started off as some, truing up between the cattle hog spreads as they're getting to the end of the month. But I would not be surprised to see some of this influence coming from the fact of that, we're looking at consumers, the potential walking away from beef again and going towards pork in the grocery store.
Okay. One last question. I probably should have asked it earlier, but is everybody pretty much out of the field up in the northern parts of the plains or not?
Pretty much, we had some pretty general rains over the weekend, pretty much everybody getting close to, anywhere from a half inch to an inch. So that did knock people out. Of course, we're got cold temperatures now too. We're back down in the 30s for the lows. So we're not really seeing a quick dry down or, drying of the rains. And we've got rain now in the forecast again for today, for Tuesday, and then again, possibly for Thursday. So it looks like most producers will be out of the field here this week.
Too early to be worried about planting delays, though, isn't it?
It is. I mean, we're only looking at May starting tomorrow, and so it's too early to start talking about anything about prevent plant or anything about delayed plantings. But you look at the long-term forecast; it's certainly in the back of everybody's mind.
No doubt. All right. Thanks, Randy. Randy Martinson with Martinson Ag. That is Market Stats.